Well, hello, folks. It's Wednesday, 21st of August, and spend a few more minutes with you. Hope everyone's doing well in this turbulent, chaotic time that we live in. I want to address a couple of inquiries. As I've said in the past, I don't answer all questions, and it just reminds me that I was asked a question I get a lot of emails. People want to start conversations, and I don't answer them generally because I just don't want to spend all my time online. So the question that came through the email most recently, I can't think of it right now, and okay, the way I have this set up, I can't get to my email easily, so I'm just going to answer the ones that I have in mind. Someone asked me, they said, well, I'm sure you've heard of the band Bauhaus. What do you think of them? Well, yes, of course I've heard of Bauhaus. Now, what I want to explain about me and rock music and rock history is, ever since the Beatles, the Beatles really solidified it to me, where I was interested in the whole thing of rock music and rock culture. So what I'm saying is that as times change, trends come and go, I became interested in what I considered the music of the street, music of the people, cutting edge trends, and what's happening next in music. So I was way into what ended up becoming punk rock before it was punk. My first thought punk was Iggy Pop and MC5 in the 60s. And when punk happened in England, it wasn't the Sex Pistols that impressed me, it was the Damned. And then other musical bands like Magazine and Susie and the Banshees. But besides that, I was intrigued with looks. Not so much that I can do the look, but that it intrigued me. This is where Bauhaus comes in. Bauhaus intrigued me by their look at first, more than their music, because I thought, I do like them, and I've had more than one album. This is the only one I've kept. I found the music to be rather on the empty side, scratchy, spidery, but there was something there. So I do like Bauhaus. The Passion of Lovers is a really good song. I like that. The song Spirit, which I have here on a picture disc, it's a really good song. But I like their image. They were mysterious. I'm not into goth. I like music that's considered goth, but it's atmospheric. I have another picture disc here. She's in Parties. This music has actually grown on me over the years. I like it more now than I did back then. Their cover of T-Rex's Telegram Sam. I like that. Didn't get to see Bauhaus, but I've seen Peter Murphy. When he came through, I didn't get a chance to meet him. I met the band, but I didn't get to meet Peter Murphy. Glad I got to see him perform. So, yeah, I rate Bauhaus. Did I think that Peter Murphy was the next David Bowie? No. But was he, did he have a look? He sure did. Okay. The other inquiry that I want to handle in this one, and I'm going to be doing those reviews, guys. FPE records. I'll be reviewing the rest of those records. I'm still absorbing them. But I showed you at the end of my last video where I was wearing a t-shirt related to some movies I'd done. This is a Chicago Acoustic Underground Cowdog Records. It's a label and a collective out of Chicago that are good friends of mine. Michael Teach runs it. Chicago Acoustic Underground. If you're from Chicago and don't know about it, look them up. Great people. A lot of they're into grassroots and American and blues music, so it's interesting how I hooked up with them. But I made a record. I'm on their label. So someone asked me how did I end up getting involved in the movie in business. It's a good question because I can share some of my history, more of my history, okay? Because I ended up doing those movies through music. I tried to think about this before getting online, so I'm going to try to give a lot of information. I hope I don't forget the main stuff. So the best way to try to explain how I ended up doing some movie work and may do more, I may not be done, is through my interest in the story of Saddle Creek Records. I'm sure most of you are aware of their label out of Omaha, Nebraska that made it big through the success of Bright Eyes, Conor Oberst. This is Casadega. This is the only one of his albums. I used to have a couple others, but I sold them. And the only other one I have is the split that he did with Sun Ambulance, the band that I'm in, okay? So let me just set it up, okay? So as I've said before, my band, and it is my band, I need to give information here because I think people are watching who have been watching it, but they never tell me. In Digital Sex, when you saw the band, when we were going, I was the bass player keyboardist, and then there was the singer, and the singer is the person who gets the attention, and so a lot of times the perception is that the singer is a primary component of the band. Now, I come from a background where in growing up and getting into watching bands and the whole beauty of bands was I was particularly drawn to bands where the whole band was on fire or the whole band was doing something, not just backing up the singer. Perfect example of that is the MC5 or Little Richard's band, where band members would have features, people would do little things to keep the audience interested. And Brownsville Station is another band who I saw early on as a young teen. They really inspired me. They were so amazingly powerful. And the original Brownsville Station's bass player was a black man. Amazing man. Very similar story to mine. He is an inspiration. So what I'm getting at is anytime I'm in a band, I'm not just a bass player. I'm not a sideman. I am a part of the band, okay? And since I started Digital Sex, I did not see myself as the bass player. I saw myself as the band leader and an important part of what was happening on stage, not just backing up the singer. Okay, now, when Saddle Creek Records started to take off, I was happy for them and also jealous because it was something I had wanted in a way, although I hadn't planned on it by trying to do the Digital Sex thing and all that. I wanted to be pro, not pro. Do you know what I'm saying? So early on, one of the early Saddle Creek bands that caught my interest and thought was any good was The Faint. And then after them, it's Cursive. Pardon me. I've only got this one single by Cursive, Dorothy at 40, because Cursive is good on stage, but I don't like listening to them. And I've sold their records. But it got years and years and years ago, it got to me that Cursive's Tim Kasher had mentioned, besides the local band Slow Down Virginia, which was The Faint before it was The Faint, another band that inspired Cursive was Digital Sex. Now, I don't know if he was thinking of the singer, Steve, but anytime you say the band Digital Sex, you're talking about me, okay, as far as I'm concerned, and the whole band, because the strength of Digital Sex was not, and I don't care if somebody hears this and they say, hey, he's talking about you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just telling the truth. The strength of Digital Sex was not our singer. It was the music and our songs. So when I heard that Cursive said in some interview or something that one of the bands that inspired them to get going was Digital Sex, that meant a lot to me. And I was jealous in a way. It's like they, through Bright Eyes and establishing the label, had achieved something I wanted. You know, I did want it, although I wasn't organized about it. And it was more of a dream rather than really wanting to go into businesses, which is the reality of the situation. You know, you got to do business. Okay, so how that led to the movies. I'm getting to it. It's worth me doing all this talk, okay? So, as I'm getting to become familiar with the Saddle Creek people, another quick aside, Connor Oberst, who is Bright Eyes, I happened to see him at one of his very first public appearances when he was like maybe 12. I went to school with his dad and his uncle at Creighton Prep. His dad was a few years ahead of me, but I was familiar with Matt Oberst because he was a musician and had a band that would play in the cafeteria and stuff like that at times. But the band The Faint, in their heyday, now they're still around, they just put on a new record, but in their early days as they were coming up, they put on amazing shows. They're still good, but in the early days here in Omaha, their shows were huge dance parties, and they had the most amazing light show and visual display setup. One of the people who worked on video for the Faint and other acts on Saddle Creek was a kid named Nick Fackler, okay? Nick Fackler is the writer, director of this movie, Lovely Still. I became associated with Nick Fackler through starting to do music with Tony Benassi's younger brother. Tony is he's a cinematographer who's done a lot of work for Saddle Creek as well as other stuff. And they were all big Bright Eyes Saddle Creek fans. And Tony's kid brother was good friends with my good friend Frank's son, Sam. Sam's like a son to me, okay? So I think when Sam was maybe about 15, he came to me and said that he and his friend Joey were messing around with music and wanted to know if I could help out with a couple things. And the fact that Sam asked me about music, anything you want, okay? But then, come to find out that there was this direct link to Saddle Creek Records through Joey's older brother, Tony. One of Tony's buddies at that time, because they were doing a lot of work together, was Nick Fackler. So I met Nick through playing in a band called One Mummy Case with Tony Benassi's younger brother. I noticed Nick at one of our shows. It was his energy. You know, Nick is a looker. He's someone that when you see him, he's a pretty boy. He is, okay? I noticed that I like good-looking people, but more than that, I like energy. I do like being around good-looking people, you know, if you haven't noticed that, or people who know me, notice that I do enjoy good-looking people, both sexes. Anyway, he was at one of our One Mummy Case shows and was really enthusiastic about the music, about what we were doing. So I met him, and the ultimate thing that happened was he asked if I would help him. He's trying to put a band together, but his bass player wasn't any good. It was this young lady, and would I be willing to give her lessons or help out? Well, I saw an opportunity to connect with Nick. He also told me at the time that he was going to be making a movie. And he was only like 19 when I met him. So because of what he'd been doing with the Faint in Saddle Creek, I took him seriously. I knew that he actually produced things, okay? So amongst the talk about music, he talked about, I'm going to be making a movie and blah, 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 blah. Very exciting, you know. So what ended up happening is that I went to Nick's for some rehearsals to check out the band and to see if I could help the bass player. Come to find out that the bass player was a young lady who had no interest in playing the bass. She was there trying to hit on Nick, which was really sad because Nick was living with his girlfriend, and they're rehearsing at Nick's place where Nick lives with his girlfriend, and there's this girl openly plotting to try to steal him. It was so weird. So that fell apart as I would come to rehearsals, and it became clear this girl had no interest in the bass at all. And after a while, I just started playing the bass, and we started a band. Went through a couple of different names, but ended up becoming Indrima. And I put out this album. Well, let me also get this together. See, there's so much information I want to share. The first thing that we did was as Indrima, was that we got together and we put out this split single with 3 other bands: Conduits, Icky Blossoms, and Touch People. This is a rare collector's item, way sold out. Indrima, Icky Blossoms, and Conduits, all on a double single. So I got involved with Nick and we started making music. We started off as a Merryweather, and then it became the Family Radio, and then it ended up becoming Indrima. And we ended up making this album. Well, it's Nick, and I helped him make it. And then, because of Nick's work with Saddle Creek and Bright Eyes, he ended up getting a limited deal with Bright Eyes label, Team Love Records. Team Love, okay? Tilly and the Wall are involved here, okay? So, but Team Love did not want to make the investment to put this out physically, the Indrima album. And I had my label DBH Recordings going, and so I agreed. I made a deal with Team Love that I would make the physical record and we would do a distribution deal, and so therefore both labels are on this. Okay, so anyway, the movie deal came about because as I started to work with Nick, this was coming together. This whole project for him started when he was like maybe 17 or 18, but stuff like this where big money is involved takes forever. But Nick and I became close. We're very good friends now. We're good friends. You know, I'm not the kind of person that hangs out with people a lot, but we're very close. So when it finally came down that this was going to happen, I asked Nick I said, I'll be a grunt. I'd like to garner some experience working on movies. You know, can I be a gopher, or, you know, whatever you call those people, a gaffer? He said, sure, but because of our friendship, he said, I'd like to go on better. And he had noticed how, even though I dress plainly, I notice people's clothing. I like clothes, especially shoes. And the wardrobe people for this movie, these 2 women, very talented and very experienced, but a handful personality-wise. So I said, how about if I have you work in the wardrobe department? Because of my psychology background. Okay, I'm being real upfront here. Anybody that sees this, if you want to dispute what I'm saying, you know, I'm telling the truth. You know, sometimes people don't like you to tell the truth. Anyway, that's how I ended up working as wardrobe assistant on this movie. However, during the filming, I think Nick sort of anticipated this might happen. There came a point in the filming where Ellen Burstyn couldn't take the wardrobe supervisor's demeanor. I'll just leave it at that. This woman she's a work of art. And Ellen got tired of her and said, I will not work with her. I don't want to ever see her again on the set. I will only work with Dereck. So I ended up like downloading, almost like literally downloading skills and information from the other wardrobe people, as well as directly from Ellen and Martin. They were amazing. They helped me so much, you know. So I went from grunt to being semi on the directorial personnel. You know, I went from being a grunt to being up a little higher. Because this was my first film, and the protocol on films is that the low people on the totem pole don't talk to the stars. You don't talk to them. I just wasn't having none of that, you know. This is just who I am, you know. And every movie I've done, I've ignored it. I started with this one, and I was getting grief at first from the first AD. You're not supposed to do it. You're not supposed to do that. I just said, fuck it. And the next thing you know, Martin told him, fuck off, leave us alone. You know, we bonded about jazz and stuff. And then Ellen, you know, she's a very serious spiritual person. And as the wardrobe person, I'm having to dress them and size them and be in the room when they're undressing. And I'm a talker. And it just became obvious that I wasn't going to be the typical low person on the totem pole like most people. I see myself the same as them. Fantastic experience. Worked really hard. So that's how I ended up getting involved in making movies. Now, the other thing I want to say is this. Rather than being ambitious and I want to be in the movies now and I want to make a career out of this, no, I've never been into that. I'm into experiencing things. So having this experience was fantastic. It led to other movies. So like, for example, by the time I got to Flyover Country working with Jim Fields says to me, well, I want you to become the big soundtrack writer in the Midwest. I said, Jim, I don't want that. I just, I like this opportunity working with you. I don't want to be a soundtrack writer. I just like making music. See, I don't want any of that box. I just like living. So the other thing I wanted to say, so Nick is still making movies. He did the movie Sick Birds Die Easy. He's working on some stuff now. I can't say what. But we did Indrima. And then he started the band Icky Blossoms. You've heard of the band Icky Blossoms, okay? They had a club hit off this album called Babes. But the first single off of this, Heat Lightning, I wrote the hook. I'm credited on the album. And it was featured on a Grey's Anatomy episode. So, another Saddle Creek thing, Nick started that band. I don't know if Icky Blossoms is going to be coming back or not. And then eventually I was asked to join Sun Ambulance, who were on Saddle Creek Records. The band is an entity as opposed to a band. Joe Knapp is a very gifted writer and songwriter, but he's not into being in a band. So when the muse hits him to write and play, that's when we play, but he's not into being in a band all the time. Another association which led to me being on Adult Swim, which I haven't checked. I think they're still showing episodes of my Friday segment. I haven't done any in a while. But another band that came out of all that stuff was a band called Coyote Bones. Members of Azure Ray, The Faint, Cursive, Now It's Overhead, or is it, Andy LeMasters and me were all on this album that was made in Omaha when David Matiziak, who had a band called Jet by Day before that, had relocated to Omaha because of his connection to Dereck Presnell from Atlanta and Tilly and the Wall. Another project that's related is this Telefono. It's kind of a box set. It's like telephone, but done through music, where David would start a conversation, send it to another artist. And this is cool because besides myself and Nick Fackler from Indrima on here and Dave, Tim Casher is on here from Cursive, Mason Brown, Jason Lowenstein from Sebadoh is on here, Jonas Bier from Mew is on here, and a bunch of other people. Eli Marduk. The names kind of run together. So this is another thing that we did. Telephone. Look it up. I think there's still copies for sale. So that's the stuff I wanted to share with you. I have more reviews coming. Before I forget, someone asked me, do I like the band Sun? Sun, with the, like the amp. I do, and very much. I only have 3 of their albums. But I like them. This is going to be long, but I wanted to share that information with you. Thanks for asking. And again, I'll close by saying I'm more interested in living than being in business. I just, I'm a hippie.